Hello, and welcome to Using a Trigger Log to Discover Your Stress Story. So, what is a trigger log and what is a stress story? This is Nahid, and I'm really excited to share the process that I've developed after coaching for 20 years with you. And this is a beginning trigger log that you're seeing on your screen right now. It's a simplified version, but it has all the important columns. So there's 5 columns here. And essentially what we're asking you to do is pay attention to times that you are triggered. And what I mean by being triggered is something pushes your buttons or gets under your skin or frustrates you. It could be getting in a traffic jam when you're in a hurry, or just being exhausted from a long day or not feeling appreciated. So many different things. And there are 5 columns in the trigger log, but the first thing that we have you do is just think of the incidents. So here I'm going to give you some example incidents that could trigger a person. So maybe my boss said that my presentation was confusing and that kind of embarrassed me and upset me. Or maybe an important meeting was held at work and I wasn't invited. Or maybe my husband was out and I was worried and I tried texting him, but he didn't respond to my text for an hour. Or maybe I got home from a long day and my house is a mess and there are other people living in my house and I'm exhausted and it just bugs me that things aren't picked up. Or maybe I find out that we have some friends that are going on a vacation together and they never even mentioned it to me and suddenly I feel really left out. So these are just examples of things that could trigger you, but I bet if you think about your life over the past even week or two, you could come up with all sorts of examples. It's really important to record the examples of when you're triggered because it can give you tons of really important information. And that information can actually be the key to your happiness, to your effectiveness overall. And I'll share what all that means. But first, what I'll do is talk about some of the other columns in this trigger log. So once you've gotten your triggers, and my suggestion is always to fill out this column first before trying to go across and fill out the row. So once you have all the examples, then for each example, I want you to spend a few minutes remembering it. And in your memories, I want you to think about different things. So the first question is, what was the actual feeling that came up for you when you're triggered? So usually, for most people, it's frustration or irritation. It could be hurt, could be anger, could be humiliation, embarrassment, sadness, shame. But think about what emotion it was for you or what 2 or 3 emotions it was for you and try to describe it in a word or 2. And then in the next column, how strong was your surge of emotion? Try to label it on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the strongest. So was it a really strong feeling, like you were so enraged you could barely contain yourself? Was it a mild blip, like a 2 or 3, where you felt the irritation, but you quickly just, rolled over it and didn't worry about it too much? Or was it kind of a 5 or a 6 where you felt it, but you were able to deal with it even though it drained you? These last 2 columns are really important because they capture information about you that you might not be paying attention to normally. The first question is, what were the thoughts running through your mind? And you'll notice here in parentheses, I say the less mature and logical, the better, which might be confusing. But the idea is we're trying to catch some of your automatic thinking patterns. And a lot of our automatic thinking patterns seem very illogical once we examine them. But it's important to catch them because they're reflections of our deeper belief system. So in some of these examples, I wrote, for example, my boss said my presentation was confusing. I wrote, oh my gosh, I'm such a loser. He thinks I'm an idiot. He's probably not going to promote me anytime soon. So this may seem like exaggerated thinking, but we want to capture it. What is he doing? Are they leaving me out? Even if you're climbing your ladder of inference and coming up with all sorts of crazy things that don't make any logical sense and that, you still want to capture those thoughts here. Then in the last column, I'm asking you, what do you need to feel or have that felt threatened or ripped away from you by this situation? what I'm asking you is, when you're feeling bad, typically you need something to feel better. So when I'm feeling humiliated, typically I want to feel proud or confident, right? So my boss says something that makes me feel really bad about my work. If I felt more confident in my work, I wouldn't feel so bad. If an important meeting was held and I wasn't invited, I want to feel included. So what you're trying to write here in this column, what you're trying to capture, is what is it that I felt I was missing in that moment that I desperately needed in order to feel okay. I needed to feel included. I needed to feel important. I needed to feel appreciated or valued, or I needed to have a sense of confidence. I needed to have things be fair. So this is a column that we're going to analyze later, and sometimes people struggle with it, but I just want you to do your best and use that as a guideline in terms of how to fill it out. Now, before I talk to you more about how to analyze your trigger log, I need to give you some background context as to why we're capturing these specific things. And in order to do that, I'm going to start with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which, if you're listening to this video, you may be familiar with. But for those of you that aren't, I'm just going to give you a basic overview. Abraham Maslow was a psychologist, and he came up with this model that is extremely popular and is probably taught in every Psychology 101 class in colleges across the nation. And it is his hierarchy of needs. And basically it says that all human beings have basic needs, and those needs are what drive us. And on a biological level, that's true. So on a biological level, we are programmed to survive and reproduce. And we need some kind of system in our body that communicates to us about what we need to do to survive and reproduce. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a great model that explains why we behave the way we do, and often why we feel certain emotional reactions. And for those of you that are interested in neuroscience, you may have heard about the amygdala, which is very popular these days because people are attributing the amygdala to our strong emotional stress reactions. And you may even hear people joking about having an amygdala hijacking, which is basically when you have a reaction and your emotions take over. So the amygdala is in a lower part of our brain, sort of in our midbrain, and it's not part of our higher brain, our prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for our language and our logic. And so often we'll find ourselves in battles with ourselves internally where our logical brain says, no, 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 this is no big deal, but our amygdala is firing all these signals to us that are emotional. Well, the model of needs here tends to explain why the amygdala would fire and why we would have emotional reactions. So let's go through it very briefly. So the pyramid has 5 levels, and each level represents a set of things that we need to survive. So when we talk about physiological and biological things that we need to survive, we need to be at the right temperature. We need to have air. We need to have water. So these are basic physiological things that we need to survive. And a great way to think about what happens when you have that need or when you don't have that need met is your emotional state. When you have plenty of air, usually you're not even thinking about air, you're just breathing it. But if someone's holding your head underwater, or you're having an asthma attack and you're having a really hard time getting air, you're starting to feel a little bit panicky. That is the emotional reaction. That's the trigger from the amygdala that you need to do something to survive, that you need to get this need met. And our goal is to have all of our needs in the pyramid met. When we have all of our needs in the pyramid met, we feel a sense of well-being, a sense of calmness. It's easy for us to focus on whatever we want to focus on. When we have a need threatened or unmet in the pyramid, we feel a surge of emotion that feels like panic, fight, flight, or freeze. And it's our signal that we need to do something. And so then we immediately have to prioritize and focus on getting that need met. I'll give you some other examples. So once all your physiological needs are met, then we have a set of needs here, safety needs, that you're not going to get killed anytime soon, that your life is not threatened by an external source. Belonging, love and belonging. Human beings can't survive very long alone. So we have a lot of biological drives to put us into community with each other. We want to be in relationship with each other. We have hormones that are pleasurable that go off when we are kind to other people because we want other people to like us. This is why it hurts so much when we're rejected or we're not included in a group. We have a high need to be in community with each other, and we're very sensitive to social cues as to whether we belong to a group or whether we don't belong to a group. And then at the higher level here, self-esteem, once we're solidly in a group, we also compete for status within that group. We want the group to see us as making a contribution. We want the group to see us as valuable or important, because the beings who are most valuable and most important in the group, they tend to get the most and they have the highest likelihood of survival. This pyramid represents an order of priority. So if you don't have air, you're not going to worry too much about belonging. So the physiological needs are the most urgent, and as you kind of work your way up the pyramid, these needs become less urgent and a little bit more long-term and strategic. But you're still going to have a strong emotional reaction if you feel an unmet need. So for example, if you're in your office and someone makes fun of the work that you did and you don't feel like anybody likes your work or thinks it's valuable, you're going to feel really down and you're going to have an emotional reaction. This top level self-actualization, this is kind of like everything else is working great, you're feeling safe, you're feeling important, you're feeling in your community, and so then we have this need or this drive to just follow our value system, follow the things we like doing, follow our interest, follow our curiosity. So I'm not going to talk too much more about self-actualization because I kind of see that as the pinnacle of all of our needs being met, and I see this more as values. So your goal is to have an intact pyramid. So you're not going to always have an intact pyramid. Your goal is to notice when something threatens the pyramid and then to respond to that. And your signal that something is threatening your pyramid is an emotional reaction. So when you're missing something you need, you're signaled with an emotional reaction. The intensity of your reaction is a reflection of how big the threat is to you. So is it easy to get what you need? Do you have the skills to get what you need? Is what you need scarce or abundant in the world? So let's use water as an example. If I start feeling thirsty right now, I happen to have a glass of water nearby and I can just take a drink. So water's abundant to me. I have the skill set to get it. It's right here and it's easy for me to do. However, if I was in the desert and I was hiking and I was lost and I only had 2 bottles of water in my knapsack, one was empty and the other one was only half full, and I was starting to feel very thirsty, I'd have a much more sinister reaction because now I've only got half a bottle of water and I have to conserve that because I don't know that water is available anywhere soon. So this is the way the system works with any level of need. So we'll use being liked. If you feel very likable, you feel like it's easy to make friends, then if you get rejected by a friend, it's usually not the end of the world. But if you feel very scarce about your friendships and you only have 1 or 2 friends in the world and you care a lot about those friends and you feel like it would be almost impossible to make any other friends and one of those friends rejects you, it's going to be a really devastating emotional experience. So scarcity versus abundance is very important in terms of the various things that we need to keep this pyramid intact. One of the things that we did in the class was we walked around and we asked people around the room, what does it feel like when you are at your best? And people used words like satisfied, content, easy for me to focus, relaxed, happy, joyful. And then I asked a follow-up question, and that is when you're feeling that way, if you were feeling that way 90% of the time, how would your life change? And everyone was like, oh my gosh, my life would change a lot. Well, why would it change a lot? It would change a lot because you'd be feeling happy most of the time, and because you wouldn't be distracted by these emotional reactions and all the stress telling you that you need to get your needs met. You'd be able to focus and you'd be able to get your work done better. So having an intact pyramid is really the key to happiness and the key to effectiveness. So your trigger log actually connects to your pyramid because when you have an emotional reaction, what's really happening is you're basically popping holes in your pyramid, right? Something's going on, a situation is going on, and you're getting holes in your needs pyramid. One of the main goals of coaching is to help people identify their unmet needs and build them in an intact pyramid. But one of the things that I learned very quickly as I was working with people as a coach is that needs are harder for people to get met than we would think. We often feel that others should meet our needs and that we don't have control over meeting them ourselves, or that there's something specifically wrong with us, that we're flawed in a way that makes it impossible to get our needs met. Sometimes when we look at people from the outside, it seems like people sabotage their own ability to get their needs met. So for example, there are so many people that desperately want love, but they're only attracted to people who don't love them back. A lot of people claim that they need more life balance and they need to relax, but when they try to take time off, they just can't sit still. And before you know it, they're running around with their head cut off again. And often there are people who, every time their bank account gets up to a certain amount, just by some really odd coincidence, something really important comes up that makes them have to spend it, and so they never really achieve their financial goals. So there's a lot of self-sabotage when it comes to building these intact pyramids. There's a lot of times when people desperately want to have a need met, but they're not getting it met. And what I've noticed in my work with people is that a lot of times we're blocking our needs from getting met. We don't give them to ourselves. So if you don't feel heard and you have an unmet need to feel heard, often you're not listening to yourself. And often when people ask you your opinion, you can't get the words out. We're attracted to people who don't give the needs to us. If you want to be valued, typically you're going to be attracted to people who don't pay that much attention to you. We dismiss it when it comes to us. If you want love and people have crushes on you, they're not the people that you're attracted to at all, and so you dismiss them. So what else is going on? Why is it so hard for people to get their needs met? Well, there are a lot of other pieces to the puzzle, but the general thing I can tell you is that it goes a little bit deeper than needs. There's something that we also work on in coaching called beliefs. And your beliefs are simply what you learn about the world and how the world works. So we create beliefs about who we are in the world, how to get our needs met, how to expect others to behave. And these beliefs tend to govern how we experience the world. And most of the time that's good, but sometimes it gets in our way and it keeps us stuck. So typically, our beliefs are created when we're less than 5 years old. But there are a couple of problems with the way that we formulate our thoughts at this age. One of the problems is that only people that we're really exposed to is that immediate circle. Could be our parents, could be our siblings, could be some other caregivers, but the immediate circle of people that we grow up with. And those people represent the whole world to us. And then when we're that young, we really haven't developed the ability to put ourselves in other people's shoes and understand the perspective of adults. I mean, we've never been an adult before. So we tend to see ourselves at the center of everything, and we will often assume that things that happen that are harmful to us are because of us, because we see ourselves at the center of the universe. The third thing, and probably the worst, is that once we have learned something and decided that it's the truth about the world, we don't question it anymore. And then what's even more important about all this is that beliefs are self-fulfilling prophecies. So let's take a look at the screen. So we'll take two people. Person A here believes that people like me. Person B here believes that people don't like me. They both get in the same situation. So they're working at a new job and they want to make friends. And so they invite someone to go out with them after work. In both situations, they get rejected. The friend says no, or the potential friend says no. And so person A, who believes that people like me, is going to have some thoughts about this. And those thoughts are going to be different from the thoughts in person B's head, that person B believes that people don't like me. So person A is likely going to think, oh, they're busy tonight, but people like me. So whenever this person is available, they're going to love doing something with me at this point. And they're going to feel pretty neutral and light and positive, and they're probably going to continue to ask person A out and other people out and work to get to know people until they've made friends. And as a result, they are going to prove, like a self-fulfilling prophecy, that people like me. Now, person B, on the other hand, they don't believe that people like them. So when they get rejected, they're going to interpret that as, wow, this person really doesn't want to go out with me. I should have never asked. I should have known they wouldn't want to spend time with me. They're going to feel more embarrassed, ashamed, humiliated. And what's the behavior that naturally extends from that? They won't ask people out. They won't attend events. They won't get to know people. They'll tend to isolate. And as a result, people won't get to know them very well, and people won't like them very much. So beliefs tend to work as self-fulfilling prophecies. We tend to only filter in information that lines up with our beliefs. And so once we have a belief that works against us, it continues to work against us our whole life unless we open that belief up and question it again. And we'll never have a reason to do that unless something comes up that causes us to do that. So that's where this program is so important. So during all my work as a coach and all the times when I thought, okay, here I am working with this person to get their needs met. I can see how they can get their needs met. I'm giving them tools, but they keep not using these tools. So I'm running into people who are sabotaging themselves and staying stuck, and despite their best intentions, are not getting their needs met. I began to realize, and I had a big breakthrough, why would people refuse to get their needs met, especially the ones they felt most desperate about? The only reason that they'd refuse to get a need met is if they had a belief that said they could not get the need met, and they had never questioned that belief again. This was a huge breakthrough, and maybe 5 or 6 years ago, helped me create what I call my multi-level belief model, which is the model of how beliefs and needs interact with each other. So essentially, start at the bottom with unmet needs, the holes in your sense of inner peace and safety that repeatedly trigger or threaten you. So it's the triggers that happen over and over and over again. It's just the needs that you just can't ever really get completely met for a long period of time. We have a scarcity belief, and the scarcity belief tells us what needs are scarce for us in the world and why. And to give you an example of this, let's say I don't feel loved or don't feel valued. Typically, my scarcity belief is going to tell me why I'm not loved or valued. Maybe it says I'm not good enough, or I'm a loser, and that's why I'm not loved or valued. Then I have a survival belief. And the thing is when I believe that something I need is scarce for me in the world, for whatever reason, I'm in a quandary because I need it to survive. I need to have my needs met to survive, all of them, including my status and including my belonging needs. So because I need all of those needs met to survive, if I discover that one of those needs is scarce, I'm going to build my entire life around getting as much of it as I can eke out. So our scarcity belief is the core belief that makes all the difference in the world. It's the belief we formed when we were little that told us that this thing was scarce for us. And we still believe it even though we're not conscious of it. The survival belief is, what's the only way I can figure out to get just a little tiny bit of this so that I can survive? So for example, if I feel like I will never be approved of, but maybe sometimes I have a big accomplishment, I get a little bit of approval, then I will build my entire life around accomplishing things. And that's what your survival strategy is. Your survival strategy is the thing that you compulsively do and you can't stop doing at all costs. I'll give a few examples. So the seeker. So the seeker their unmet need is to feel loved or respected or valued, let's say. And what they decided is that the only thing that would ever kind of make them valuable in the world is if they found the ideal job. So their survival belief is they have to find that ideal job in order to be happy or to finally, prove themselves in the world. And so their survival strategy would be to be constantly seeking that ideal job. But because beliefs are self-fulfilling prophecies, then nothing that they have will ever feel like the ideal job. They'll always be pursuing the ideal job, but they'll never actually feel like they're in the ideal job. They'll always be desperate, but they'll never be satiated. That's the problem with these unmet needs. So the collateral damage for the seeker is they're never satisfied. If we take the achiever, maybe they satisfy their scarcity survival belief says that they need to achieve, then they can never stop achieving things, and they're never satisfied with their accomplishments. So they have to achieve more, and then they're still not satisfied with their accomplishments, and they have to achieve more. And maybe the collateral damage is they're not spending time with their family, or they want some relaxation or life balance, but they just can never get it because they have to keep achieving. And anytime they start feeling threatened, they've got to achieve again. So they spend all their time wrapped up in their survival strategy. Some people are people pleasers. And so they spend all their time pleasing other people and they never get to be happy themselves. So one of the things that you're going to do in the program, if you go through it, is build your own puzzle. And you're going to build your own puzzle from your trigger log. One of the things that you'll discover as you build your puzzle is your stress story. So we talked about how this class is about using your trigger log to discover your stress story. Well, your stress story basically comes from the thoughts column. I'm going to go all the way back here. From the thoughts column here in your trigger log. This is your stress story. So if you get 20 entries in your trigger log, you're going to start seeing the same things said over and over again. Those same things that are said over and over again, that's your stress story. But what do you do with your stress story? Well, let's go forward here. Your stress story is your ingrained belief that there are some things you need to survive that are virtually impossible for you to get in this world. Your stress story explains to you why that is and what you must do at all costs to survive as a result. This creates a scenario where you will have stress reactions related to your unmet needs, and you will compulsively engage in your survival strategy no matter what the cost is to you or others. One thing to think about is when you come to coaching, you will always be seduced to work up here. You will always want to work on your survival strategy, no matter what I tell you. But my job with anybody I coach is to get you down here, to help you find your scarcity belief and turn that into an abundance belief. Because until you change your scarcity belief, you'll be trapped in your belief system. So our goal is to change this belief system, and this is the key to getting you to an intact pyramid. One of the tools that we use once you've discovered your scarcity belief is what we call an abundance log. And so I have a lot of questions that I have you ask to help you, but the only way that you can change a belief, and you should know this, is to find evidence. So it's kind of like you have a case that was closed. Now you're opening the case and you're willing to re-examine the evidence. So the first big victory is discovering your scarcity belief, and then the second big victory is being willing to open your mind to the possibility that it might not have been true. Maybe when you were a kid, it seemed true based on your perception, but it's worth re-examining. So if you can get to the point where you're like, okay, this is worth re-examining, then we pull that belief out and we start analyzing it. We start having you actively reassess it. and you're relearning whether or not this thing that you need is actually scarce in the world for you or abundant. This is a process. It takes time. And the big thing that happens to people is they forget about it because your brain is so programmed to be on autopilot that your brain will think this is irrelevant. Why should I bother re-examining this belief? And you will just forget. So one of the things that we have in the program is sort of a built-in mechanism where we'll continue to remind you and we'll continue to have you doing logs and bringing in evidence. And that's what really accelerates your process. And what ends up happening is you do this over and over again, and then your life starts completely changing. So here is actually the whole process that we go through in my Accelerated Growth Program. First, we start by using a trigger log to discover what comes up over and over again, what needs aren't getting met. Then we have you work on getting a need met, the needs that you identify. You'll end up noticing your thoughts when you get these needs met, and what you'll discover is that you're actually blocking yourself from getting the needs met. Once you realize that, then you'll start being able to get a sense for what your scarcity beliefs are and your survival strategies. We're going to use that information to fill out your own puzzle so you're clear on where to work. Then we work on relearning your beliefs, changing your scarcity beliefs to abundance. Number 5 here is repeat the process and feel your belief system loosening. So the loosening process feels something like this. You start to have an emotional reaction, and then you're able to sort of stop yourself and go, wait a minute, listen to these thoughts I have in my head. They may not be true. And if you started an abundance log, you're going, wait a minute, I have all this evidence that tells me that these thoughts I'm thinking aren't logical. And you're able to calm right down and create that space. That's what I call a belief system loosening. So things that you used to just assume were true in the past, you would live in your story and you would believe that it was the truth and not just a story. Now you're like, oh, wait, I made this up. This is my thinking pattern. This might not be true. This is just the way I'm automatically thinking. So you have that deeper voice inside you sort of saying, oh, I don't know that this is really true. And maybe I don't need to have such a big reaction. And that calms you right down. What I have found is that the first time you do a puzzle, you might want to do another puzzle and another puzzle. So if you repeat this process maybe 5 times. So I did it 5 times. And the first 3 puzzles seemed quite different from each other. But then when I got to the 4th puzzle, I could see how that 4th puzzle linked to the other 3. And when I got to the 5th puzzle, it's like I hit the core. There's a huge difference when you hit the puzzle that gets to your very, very core belief system, which is the one you actually did make up when you were really young. And then you hit the phase I call the unraveling. And that's when you suddenly realize that you don't need your survival strategy any longer because you start realizing that the thing you needed wasn't scarce after all. And you start allowing yourself to receive it. So then you continue to work on getting your needs met, but you're starting to get your needs met in other ways. And so you start feeling like, wow, I don't have to do that anymore. If you're a people pleaser, well, I don't have to, run and double check to make sure they weren't pissed off by my email. I don't have to go out to that party just because they invited me. I don't have to work until 3 a.m. to get all this work done and to have that big, to win that award. I can spend time with my family and I can actually enjoy it. I don't have to worry about it. So there's all of these things, and it's really amazing to kind of go through that feeling. I call it the unraveling because that's the way it feels to me, like I'm unraveling the belief system. And then once you've unraveled for a few weeks, you're sort of in that foggy phase of transitioning where you're not having to do the same behaviors, but sometimes you still do them. You just don't feel like you're compulsively doing them. You're doing them just because you haven't ever done anything else in these situations. Then you go through what we call the rebuilding. The rebuilding is where you're consciously making the changes you've always wanted to make in your life, but you've struggled with before. So let's say that you've been a compulsive eater. Suddenly you're finding that it's not so hard to stick to an eating plan. Let's say you've been a compulsive doer. Suddenly you're realizing it's not so hard to relax. And so you get to be creative and think about different ways that you want to relax. Let's say you used to be a people pleaser and you would never talk about getting your own needs met. Suddenly it's not so hard to lay down the line with someone and say, I need this from you. So this is really a fun process to go through. So one of the things that I wanted to share with you is a little bit of a pitch, because if you're listening to this in the summer of 2019 and the process intrigues you, I have a mission to put 25 people through the program all the way from the beginning through the unraveling and the rebuilding stages. And I'm going to be using this time to analyze what parts of the program work best for people, where people get stuck. I'm going to be adding and modifying exercises on their experiences. And because of that, I'm offering specials where you can go through the entire program in a really focused manner, and I'm going to be holding your hand the whole way. So if you're interested in doing this, all you have to do is reach out to me, and I can either get you started or answer questions, and I have my contact information right here on the screen. One thing that excites me more than anything about this process is that there's so much hype sometimes about miracle programs that'll transform you if you just follow the steps. But the problem is if we have a survival strategy that doesn't allow us to follow the steps, then regardless of how much willpower you put into it, it won't be successful. So that's why miracle diets don't really work. It's not that there's anything wrong with the diet, it's just that people can't follow the steps because the eating behaviors that they have are part of their survival strategy. Same thing with business growth plans, people that have trouble selling. A lot of time, you'll have these hyped programs. Oh, we'll show you how to market. We'll show you how to get leads. We'll show you how to do this and that. Well, it's not that any of those plans don't work. It's that you don't find yourself very willing to take the actions. And the reason you don't find yourself willing to take the actions is because you've got a survival strategy that doesn't allow you to do it. So after years of working with people and analyzing how people get stuck, I feel like I've finally found the missing piece. I've shared this process here so you can see if it makes sense to you intuitively. I can tell you it works because I've been able to do things after going through the process that I've never been able to get myself to do before. And I have clients working through this having breakthroughs faster than they have in the past. So if you feel stuck in any aspect of your life, this process can get you unstuck, and I'm willing to walk you through it step by step. If you'd like to try it out, all you have to do is reach out. So take care, and maybe we'll talk soon.